Sure.
Hello, everybody. My name is Honor Rukudzo Sitole, and I'm the CEO and founder of Inside Fitness 360 here in Frisco, Texas. As some know already that we're counseling and life coaching, and we help, with all mental health issues and different types of emotional issues. Now, today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, so that we could talk about mental health because mental health is a reality in my world because this is what I gave my life to do. But then realizing we've just been through a very big pandemic, I realized that the world is in crisis. And the pandemic just brought to the surface everything that was going on that was underneath already. So we are here to start this discussion and to hopefully by the end of this conversation understand that this is something, what is mental health, and what are the challenges that are common and how to identify with it, and maybe just leave you even with some steps on what to do with mental health. So I'm going to introduce my guest to y'all today, and this is Bongani Chinkanda. Hello, sir. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, and you, man. How's the US?
The USA is good, man. It's good. It's raining in Texas. It's been raining for 6 weeks and gloomy
Wow.
and cloudy. But you know what? We're all
Yeah.
right, and it's very hot at the same time. I don't know how you can make sense of that. How is Joburg in South
It's
Africa?
cold.
That's where he's joining me, man.
It's raining. It's raining, and it's very cold. So it's winter now. So we're in the thick of it.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Uh, That's good, man. That's good. Thanks for agreeing to join me, man, and just
Sure.
do this live with me so that, and also allowing yourself to share your story with you, man. So
Yes.
I'm always grateful for that. So why is mental health so important to you, man?
So I think for me, it's become a healing journey. I suffered from depression and anxiety in 2016. I was depressed for about a year due to loss and a failed business.
Yeah. Huh.
So coming out of that, I haven't suffered depression and anxiety again. I think for me it was not chronic; it was more situational, as I call it. And looking back, and having been through COVID-19 and just speaking to people, I mean, the other day,
Mm-hmm.
the other twice I rode my mountain bike with two mates, unrelated, and they're both going through tough times.
Uh-huh.
And these
Mm-hmm.
are strong, successful young men in their
Mm.
30s, and they're asking me, like, dude, like, what do I do? How do I battle through this thing?
Uh-huh.
And I thought that I give this thing a face, um, in that and normalize it
Mm-hmm.
in my advertising and marketing community and sales community, especially because it's a high pressured environment. When COVID-19 finally arrived on our shores,
Uh-huh.
our industry was the first to sort of get impacted because
Uh-huh.
clients quickly cut marketing and advertising budgets. And we saw a lot of retrenchments. I was a CEO of a business that had to close down
Yeah.
because our product was not relevant anymore. And I saw some of my staff going through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
It starts from shock, denial, bargaining, and then it just slides onto the other side. So
Uh-huh.
that's why I'm quite passionate about it. And I guess it's also trying to find a cause in life. You just can't randomly live through life and not give back something.
I like that, man. I really do like that
Yeah.
because, and let me give people a little backstory here because what prompted me to do this live here is I read a post that you put, on mental health, and you kind of detailed and shared some personal experiences in regards to your journey with battling depression and anxiety. And that spoke to me on
Yeah.
two fronts because one, at that moment when I read that post, because I myself has battled anxiety, what I mean? And as you know, in business, it's a high pressure environment, and there's all these demands and the positions that we hold, because I'm the CEO of this establishment and the founder. So when the pandemic hit, I was actually, because at that moment they told us that everything's going to shut down March 16th. And which meant that everybody had to go home, and businesses had not set up, to work from home. And so means that all my contracts froze, all my lines of credit and all this stuff. And I had a staff to pay. And I'm responsible for 10 families, that rely on me. So I don't only have problems, like a budget for my household to worry about, but for everybody else in the office. So anxiety was at a peak. And I think the day you made that post too, I was just trying to figure out some things about the business direction, because we just reopening and how to adjust. And I had a very difficult morning. I had an anxiety attack. And I think that's when I reached out to you. And so I was like, wow, we are in this space. We work on these things, and we have employees, and we have people who are family men, people who are mothers, daughters, sons, and everybody is just struggling. So I'm going to ask if you can just share a little bit of your story, as to how did it start, because you kind of shared a little bit. Just give us an overview of the story you shared on social media.
Yeah, so I think in 2015, I had owned and run a business. I was a CEO as well. And I just due to mismanaging the business and stubbornly believing that it was going to work in a tough economic environment.
I like that honesty, man, because it's part of the process, right? To be successful, you have to be somehow stubborn. And
exactly. Because I had turned it around a couple of times before, and I thought, no, we're going to ride this wave out, but we didn't. I should have retrenched people as sad as it is a bit earlier, because the pain on them and the shock as well would have been less, but I carried the burden. I got in lots of debt, got money from friends, from family, and then ultimately got to a point where the business failed, and I was in this deep, dark hole called debt, and being broke and trying to provide for a family. So I ended up having to go work for a competitor. So before I went to go and work for my competitor, I realized I used to run about 5Ks, 10Ks, 3 times a week, but I couldn't just run anymore. I couldn't sleep because I was constantly worried. And I got to a point where when I joined the competitor, it became worse because I always say, and it's literally, I used to park in the basement. And every time I'd leave my heart in the basement, and I'd go with my head to the 5th floor and work. And my heart wasn't in it. So if a friend of mine always says, I get to achieve everything I put my head to, because I'm an all-heart person, right? And once my heart and my head are connected, there's no stopping me, whether it be it running marathons or running a business or whatever it is. So that time, everything seemed to have separated. Then it just became worse. I couldn't sleep. I remember I would sleep at 11 o'clock and wake up at 2 in the morning, and I would be up. I literally could hear the first bird chirp in the morning. And you see 3:30, and you're trying and you're battling to sleep. Then when I then I would be so weak to bath to go to work. So one day my aunt, who's a psychologist, came to visit, and she's like, he doesn't look well, he's depressed. And everybody I was depressed. I can't be depressed, man. I'm a black man, I'm a strong black man. in South
Let's
Africa.
talk about that for a second, because this is it sounds like barrier to treatment, right? Because we have our
Yes.
cultural beliefs, right? I'm a
Yeah.
black man, and depression is not real. It's for the white man. These things are not
Yes.
true and they're not real. And
Exactly.
sometimes that's where we come, men up. I taught you to be stronger than this. And as a result, we miss all the signs and symptoms. And as I was hearing you speak, you're talking about you were having trouble sleeping,
Yes.
waking up at 2,
Yeah.
and you were tired.
Yes.
It took a chore to bath
Yes.
and all that. So these were all signs. All right.
Of
So what did
that.
you, and it took you on towards a psychologist to
Yes. You
notice
said
this stuff. Wow.
depressed. So for like a couple of weeks, I dabbled into going to see psychologists. So for me, I thought 30 minutes on the couch would sort it out, right? So I'd go sit with a psychologist and have a chat. And I was never honest how I was feeling. So they're trying to address the business issues and try to give me advice in terms of handling it. But it was just compounding, right? So they never tell you the more successful a business is, the harder the failure, you know? So if you want to fail in business, a small business is fine, you recover quickly. The bigger the business, it just gets worse. So I'm dealing with landlords wanting their rent, the banks, friends, family wanting money. I remember I always used to look forward to Friday because people obviously respect and stop calling you on the Friday and leave you until Monday. And I would literally get a panic attack every Monday at 8 o'clock because the phone calls would start. The bank, the friends, suppliers, the landlord, and everybody, you know. So then I still tried to see psychologists, and then I remember going to see a psychiatrist at a clinic called Akiso Clinic, which is one of the psychiatric units here in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the psychiatrist said to me, "I need to admit you." And I was like, "No, you're not going to admit me." I'm working. I can't afford to lose this job. I've just lost my business. My family needs it. So I was like, "How long? Can I do it over the weekend?" And she's like, "If you had come to me 4 months ago, I'd have said Friday out, Sunday. Yeah. You've come to me and you're gone. You're far gone. I can see it in your eyes." Because I couldn't sit down in her office. I would stand up, sit next chair, because I was panicking. And then she said to me, "If you don't check yourself in the next 5 days, you're going to attempt and probably succeed in killing yourself." And I was like, then in my head, I was like, these people, they just want to make money, right? So I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'll be back." I said, I'll be back. And she said, the thing about mental health and depression and anxiety is it's voluntary check-in and admission. So then I'm not going to strap you and make you sit here. It's not like you've got cancer or anything. You have to sign yourself in. So I said, I'll be back. And my dad, I tell him, and he's in Malawi, right? So initially, I used to have crying episodes in the morning because I used to pray with my mom. And my dad would lose it, like, "Stop crying, you're a man, you've got 3 boys. What are you doing?" And when he found out that I was depressed, his tone changed. And he's like, "My son, it doesn't matter what you lose, everything is material. You have to get to hospital, because if you die, your kids, there's no one to look after them but their mom, right? And they need a father." So every day for 7 days, we played cat and mouse with my dad. "Are you checking yourself in?" "No, Dad, I'll go today. I've just got one more project at work. I'll sort it out." But when I think back, it was also a sign of depression, where you just make random decisions. You don't know what you're doing. You're incoherent. You say one thing, you say you're going to do one thing this time, you're going to do another this time. And it's just, you just in this, I call it a tumble dryer, where it's just, and you're trying to hold on, and so then what we ended up doing is I had this big project at work, and I messed it up so bad. And I remember that day I had 3 panic attacks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I just wanted to jump off the building.
You know, let me ask you to explain this. What is a panic attack? Because we keep on stating that so that people can know the symptoms. Because the biggest two things that I know people that struggle with, and even the World Health Organization estimates that 4 out of every 10 people are walking around with anxiety and depression and don't even know. And then there's 264 million people who are known that should be living with this condition. But a lot of people, they don't report because they don't know what they're dealing with. So what's a panic attack? Let people know so that they can figure this out.
Geez, I think it's more, when somebody says something that's hurtful, you take it beyond personal, right? It becomes this big thing. So if somebody says you're an idiot, you take it to this, because now you'll be like, oh, whatever. If you think I'm an idiot, that's your own issue. But now, like, I'm an idiot, I'm useless. And then you start having, like, your chest becomes tight and you feel like the world is closing in, the doors are closing in. You can't talk. I remember just shaking and I needed water and I was sweating and even my assistant said, "Are you okay? Are you good?" Like I was almost blacking out. And it's like it's a short episode, but like it seems like forever. So it could be like 5 minutes, but it seems like you've been in this situation for like 30 to 1 hour. And it goes away, but it's more you fail to breathe, you need air, you need to open the window or something. That's how
your heart's racing.
Like
shortness of breath, you can't even function, you feel tight, like these symptoms. Shortness of breath, can't breathe properly.
You're having 3 of those in one day. So I was just like, I'm tired. And you can imagine I was having like 3 hours of sleep over a 3-month period. I mean, just even normally when you haven't slept, you're irritable. But now I'm sick, right? So I remember I had painkillers at home, and I went home, and it was like at 11 at night. I called the hospital again. They've got a 24-hour ambulance service. They had offered to come fetch me. I said, no, I'll be good. I'll come in the morning. Again, it's playing on you. But now there's a voice saying, just take your life. This is over. You're not worth it. No one loves you, And I always say the funny thing about human beings, we are the only species that we can, funny enough, right now that we're having a conversation, you and me, we've got like an eye on the wall and we can see each other and you can see yourself, right? So it's like you can see yourself and you're useless, and that you seeing yourself, you can see the full embodiment of being useless, and you're like, but no one loves me. Like, why should I stay? And and then I called the South African, another hotline, South African Depression and Anxiety Group. I phoned them, and they just tried to cancel me over the phone. Told me to calm down. Told me to phone back and I was like, I'm gonna kill myself. And like, no, don't. Because it's an NGO, so they don't have facilities. Send somebody over. Then I just went into the kitchen, took like 15 painkillers, put them in my mouth. The saving grace of that moment was the fact that I remember clearly seeing my son on a date, and he's like 23, and he's speaking to this lovely young lady, and she's asking him to say, "You never talk about your dad, right? You always talk about your mom, And he's like, oh gosh, oh my God, like I have to have this conversation again, right? And he says, no, my dad committed suicide, and at that moment, it flashed like it must have been seconds. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do this to my boys, because they're gonna have a stigma, because normally people think depression is genetic and. So I went to the bathroom. and vomited my meds, and I was taken to the hospital the next day.
Mhm.
And I was
Wow,
like,
man.
check me in, doctor, I'm ready now. And she just looked at me, and she looked at me and she says, can I please have your phone and your laptop? That was another fight that we had
Uh-huh.
for like 4 hours.
Uh-huh.
I was like, no, no, one more email. And you're like, one more phone call. Because I was scared that if I switch off, my world is going to fall apart. I mean, you can imagine now somebody saying, I'm taking your phone for 14 days. You like freak
Man,
out. It makes it worse,
man.
right?
And I want to talk about this a little bit here because this is really important, man, that it took having to get to the end like that. And what we're fighting against is the stigma and the feeling of mental health. And
Yeah.
it always is interesting to me that if we have type 2 diabetes, we're going to go to the doctor. If we have heart issues, if you have high blood pressure, we're going to go. But when it comes to mental health, we have a resistance because for me, I resisted for a while. And like you, I was successful and I was still working in the corporate world. I was a
Yeah.
director in a company that had almost 5,000 people, highly compensated. But every time I'd park in the parking lot and cry before I get into the job. And I was depressed and I hated every bit of it, but I wouldn't get treatment. But one day it just hit the wall. And I think it was after my dad passed away. That's when everything came to a head and I almost lost my mind.
Yeah.
And I finally said, you know what? And death was better. When I started thinking about those things like death is better, and I thought about it that time, my daughter, and I was like, wow, you know what? If I was to die today, too many people are relying on me, and I need to go get help.
Yeah.
And so what is it? Some of the things, if you can just state your mindsets, the resistance, because a big part of it, I know, yes, when you're not feeling well, you're not in your rational mind. That's one thing that depression, anxiety do. They take your rational mind away.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you could say you were fighting against?
So I think, so for me, I speak for entrepreneurs, right? We are very we very highly driven individuals.
Yes.
Who, I mean, what we do is a risk every day, right?
Absolutely.
Because the things that we build can disappear overnight. I mean,
borderline insanity. That's what I call it.
Exactly. Whoever knew about COVID-19, right? So, but that's what we do, and we love what we do, and and somehow we feel a sense of control in the chaos. And when you're depressed, you sort of believe, no, this is just like a bad month where some clients haven't paid me. I'm gonna make a plan, I'll move things around, and we'll come on the other side. Or this is a bad patch in the month or in the quarter, and we'll come out on the end. So you still got that personality strain with you, and it drives you, and it fights you. So it's like your body is eating itself, right? And you believe that if I hide this long enough, I'll be able to fight it by myself, and I'll win, and I can start again, But the unfortunate part is that depression is just as bad as cancer. You cannot, without getting treatment, you cannot win, And I think for me, if one does not look at it as a sickness that needs to get treated medically, therapy, and all that stuff, is the being in denial and feeling a sense of control while you're losing control is like that. I think I've actually got the right analogy. Having depression is like drunk driving.
Oh, whoa, I like that, sir. Don't copyright that. I'm gonna steal that.
It's like drunk driving, right? Because you always feel you are in control and you remember your way home. But one day you don't and you die. And depression is like that. You feel like you're in control and you're still gonna get to the other end. You believe that you can park after you cry for 5 minutes, you can get into the office and you're fine
Uh-huh.
because you've cried. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you read up, you Google what depression is. You're like, okay, I've got the symptoms. Okay, I've cried today, but I've sorted that the crying is gone. But the thing about it is that it's still in you, it's still eating you, right? So all
Uh-huh.
the triggers. So let's say in your situation, the trigger. In my situation, my trigger was working for my competitor. I hated it. I didn't like it there, but
Uh-huh.
but it was triggering me every day for 6 months. But I
Mm-hmm.
believe that if I just go home, I remember just getting home and all I wanted to do was be on the couch and just forget. And then I'll start again
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow. But then I hate going there again. So it's compounding. So again, analogy of drunk driving. Before you leave, you're like, nah, man, today's two shots or whatever. Yesterday I managed on 2 shots. I'll drink a third one.
Uh-huh.
I'm still fine. And it just goes until it gets to the end. Unfortunately, for many people.
Let's talk about, because you actually introduced something that's interesting here, because in the absence of getting proper treatment, which is going to talking to professionals, like doctors, and we start to have unhealthy coping mechanisms, in that we actually deal with. And I'm glad you bring entrepreneurs, because you and me, we talk about this all the
Mm.
time. And I think
Yeah,
we should have one especially for entrepreneurs, because that's a
sure.
whole different journey. But in the absence of
Yeah.
healthy ways of coping and getting treatment, you end up developing unhealthy
Mm.
coping ways, because you bring a very interesting point, about, what you just mentioned about the shots, that it starts with one shot. I coped with one shot, then two, then three, and it keeps on increasing. It brings to light that every time in the absence of dealing with mental health in a healthy manner, we adapt unhealthy ways of dealing with it. Now, a healthy way to cope would be to go see a mental health practitioner, which may be a doctor or a mental health counselor or therapist, to help you deal with what you're dealing with. And I'll use myself as an example. I became a workaholic and I drank too much. And this just made me cope. And when we talk about coping, it's trying to avoid feeling what you're feeling emotionally. So you find ways to kind of distract you from seeing or experiencing the reality of where you are. Did you adopt any of those
Mm.
methods like that whilst you were during your battle?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the early months. My coping mechanism was debt. I was
Mm-hmm.
just borrowing money from friends, from the wife, from
Mm.
the bank, from suppliers, not paying. And I think for me that was the coping mechanism, because I didn't want to feel the pain and face the reality
Uh-huh.
of a failed business. So when I look back, that was my coping mechanism. So I didn't do alcohol, I didn't do drugs, I didn't go sleep with prostitutes or any risky behavior. Well, taking debt is risky behavior. So debt was I didn't do anything physically to harm myself.
Uh-huh.
But I think for me, it was the financial uh, clutch that was debt.
And I like that, because we all have coping mechanisms, and sometimes we only look at the ones that are
Mm,
highlighted, like drinking, sex, and all
mm.
this. Sometimes people go to church too much. 8 days a week you're in church.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, Monday Bible study, Wednesday Women's League, Wednesday
Yes.
we're cleaning the church, Thursday preparing for youth meeting, Friday, the Saturday cleaning the sanctuary, Sunday church all day. That's unhealthy. That's too much church. So
Mm,
even some people, like I mentioned earlier, workaholics, and some people sex, and
mm,
some people anger, rage, whatever
mm,
frustrations that we do. So we all have different ways, and because we just look at people using cocaine or something like that and
mm,
think that these are the highlight, they're doing something wrong, but we have subtle ways of dealing with that.
mm.
Now, I want to segue into, what did you learn about yourself when you started the treatment? Because people wonder what treatment is like. Am I going to be put in a straitjacket and pinned to a wall, or what? Because that's what deters people from seeking mental health
Yeah.
treatment.
Yeah, so I mean, for the first 3 days, I was on suicide watch and I was heavily drugged because I hadn't slept. So what they needed me to do is to get into a deep sleep. So they gave me because what that would do was to start balancing the chemicals in my head, because the lack of
Uh-huh.
sleep causes huge chemical imbalance. That's why
Yes.
you lose focus because the chemicals are even when you drive, they say you need to rest because the chemicals
Uh-huh.
in your brain start messing with you. So you can imagine 3 months of sleeping 3 hours a day. I had lost lots of sleep. So I needed to catch up on my sleep. So for 3 days, I was on suicide watch, but I was not in a straight jacket. It was just my bed was positioned next to the sister's station, and they would check on me like every hour, just to make sure I'm okay. And then we started all sorts of therapy. So you see a psychiatrist, you see a psychologist, you see a social worker, and then you do group therapy, and then in there it's color therapy, and you have group discussions. What I learned about myself was the power of forgiveness, and the power of
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness of forgiving yourself first.
Uh-huh.
Because what most people suffer from is guilt of
Uh-huh.
whatever. So if you're getting divorced and you committed adultery, why did I do this? Why did I do that? Or for me, it was, why did I take out all this debt? I've hurt a lot of people. Why should I do this? Or if you're a parent and you're abusing your child, why did I? So there's
Mm-hmm.
always something that you're trying to get rid of. So it's important to
Uh-huh.
forgive yourself and look at life. That life is a journey of learning, and you make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. Even you and me now, we're trying to sit here and try and figure out life, and we're probably making
Yeah.
mistakes as we go along, right? But you
And
only
I love
realize
that.
the fact, because all you're doing is you're trying to live life. Because no one, even like people who think they've got this COVID-19 thing sorted out, vaccines and all that. There's a lady on the radio I heard today. She said, "You can't ask me those questions because the reporter was asking her, but are you getting it right?" And he said, "You can't ask me those questions because we can only know in a year or two's time whether we got this thing right.
Uh-huh.
So it's learning as we go, and life is learning as you go, and it's better to learn from other people's mistakes than your own, but you still have to create your own, and you still have to make your own mistakes. So forgiving yourself, and also having things to live for. And I think for me,
Uh-huh.
it's my 3 boys. I always say our children did not choose to be in our lives. We brought them.
Uh,
So I
Uh-huh.
was a willing participant in the process of bringing them to this world. So how could I be an unwilling participant and check out on them? So for me, it is that part. I learned that about myself. And the one thing that also helped me was being preemptive in terms of your triggers. So
Uh-huh.
I remember very well, I told myself, when we are going into lockdown, chances are my business might not survive because we don't know how lockdown is going to take, right?
True. Uh-huh.
And, and I went in with the worst case scenario plan. If the business fails, I lose my job. This is what I'm going to do, right?
Uh-huh.
And not financially, but just mentally.
Uh-huh.
How will I take the bad news? How will I process it? And maybe I knew that was going to happen, but when my boss told me that my company is closing, I don't have a job, it shocked me for like 2-3 hours. I was like, fine.
Uh-huh.
Next morning, I went for a run. I was like, let me keep my running healthy, reading, right? My exit plan to leave the business. In 2 weeks, I'd exited. I didn't have a job when I left, but I still
Uh-huh.
kept busy to the point where I ended up starting a new business, which is doing quite well now with a couple of other partners. But for me, those are the
Wow.
3 things that I learned. So being very preemptive in terms of your triggers. So always know the stuff that scares you, right? So
Uh-huh.
for me, not being paid by a client doesn't freak me out, right?
Uh-huh.
Because as long as you got your purchase order number and you did the work, you can always go to court and they'll pay you, right?
Absolutely.
The thing that
Wow.
the thing that freaks me out is running out of revenue. So when you can't bill anymore, and ultimately you've come to the end of the road for your business, right? And
Yeah.
and for me, so I start preparing for stuff like that and mitigating, but I should never get to a place where I panic, because that will give me the trigger of my failure in the past and
Uh-huh.
situations. So it's just learning about that. And
Man.
and
Wow. This is really good stuff, man, and I love, people always ask me, why did I name my practice Inside Fitness?
yes,
Because what became apparent to me was that everything starts on the inside. If you're not well on the inside, the outside is not going to be okay, because our coin phrase is the quality of your internal self reflects on the quality of your external self. So if you're not happy and things are not working on the inside, mentally,
shows,
emotionally, it shows with the
yeah,
chaos you create.
yeah,
Now, I love the fact that first accepting your humanity, that,
yeah,
hey, I'm not going to get it right all the time. I'm going to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. This is the
yeah,
reality of being a human being. That's number one. And number two, learning to forgive yourself and to allow yourself to be that human, right? And say, hey, I know you made this. This was a poor decision, and this, because a
yeah,
poor choice is just a poor choice. You can
sure,
work yourself, like when you're driving with your GPS, if you miss your exit, it's always going to tell you
mm,
recalculating. So life is a bunch of recalculatings because it's a journey. And the third thing that you say, the awareness of my triggers, what
yeah,
scares me, what fears me, and how can I tell myself the truth, and how can
mhm,
I reframe it? Because in psychology, reframing it means, how can I change how I see and look
mm,
at it? Because that, to me, kind of gave me that sense of peace. And now, for the first time, I relaxed, because the first time I rested in my life, because those are
sure.
the things, that I was learning
And you
about myself.
physically feel the burden off your shoulders, right? Like when
Yes.
you're like, because
And
you're walking around and it's like it's this invisible weight that's around your
uh-huh.
shoulders. Yeah.
And before I started this business here, this office that I have,
Yeah.
my previous business, I had started with partnerships, and there was a software company. And I
Yes.
lost almost 50 grand in that business. Just lost it totally.
That's a
And
lot.
I was depressed, and I had to
Yeah.
go back to work. And
Yeah.
so when I started this, I was a little bit afraid, and some of those fears still haunt me. But in
Yes.
6 years in this one, we've just been growing, and I'm learning to rest in the business. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have to do one for entrepreneurship, but I
Right.
wanna, yeah, man, I wanna close this one here talking about, you mentioned some methods, some places to get help, because
Yeah.
people need to get help. The help is out there,
Yes.
and even your country, every
Yeah.
country you are in, because I know this is going to be watched across the world,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
there is mental health help in every country where you are. And the worst is, you can go to, I think at best, you can go to an emergency room. They have
Yeah.
somebody, regardless where you are in the world, who deals with mental
Yes.
health.
Sure.
And yes, and get help. There's no shame in your game,
100%.
You cannot live the life that you want without
Mm.
having the mental state that you
Yeah.
require. Because
Yeah.
right now, I see my mental health is my investment. That's
Yeah.
where I start every time. And
Yes.
I heard you say, when they told you we're going to have to close the COVID, the first thing you said, I'm going for a run. I'm going to maintain my mental health, because so long as your mental health is in order, everything else is irrelevant. You'll figure out what to do. You will
Yeah.
figure out what to do. And
Mm.
so, how do you continuously maintain yourself? What things have you adapted so that you can maintain the optimum, your mental, emotional
Sure.
imbalance here?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's exercise helps me quite a lot.
Uh-huh.
Um, And somebody actually said I do extreme mountain biking, and a friend of mine said the way you're going at it, it seems extreme. So I try to exercise at least 5 to 6 days a week on a
Uh-huh.
good. I spend time with people that I love. I've learned to cut out people that would affect my self-esteem.
Oh, I like that.
And sometimes, and sometimes people, they think they mean well, but they don't. So
Absolutely.
I try to minimize that exposure. I haven't, this year, reading has just been difficult. I think it's just been, there's been a lot on the go. So
Uh-huh.
so sometimes I'd read, but as much as I like watching the news, when it's too much,
Uh-huh.
I switch it off.
Yeah, because it's become like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
negative and a source of
yeah.
fear and frustration. Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
sometimes just I turn it off, and then I think it's being mindful,
Uh-huh.
things that can trip you. So sometimes being just alone in your thoughts is not a great thing. So
Uh-huh.
when I in a very high stress time, I try to avoid that. But then
Uh-huh.
sometimes I try to be alone so I can think and just process my thoughts,
Uh-huh.
because it's a funny thing, but sometimes you have to be alone to process your thoughts and go back to your
Uh-huh.
world. Uh, and for me, I do that when I do my long mountain bike ride,
Uh-huh.
so 3 hours out on my own. And when I come back, the things that I was concerned about, and also just changing how you look at situations and taking responsibility. I've got this saying. I've got two
Uh-huh.
sayings. I've got a saying I always say, it's about you have to stay in the fight,
Uh-huh.
right? So when you look at all the world champions, all the teams that have ever won anything,
Uh-huh.
they did not win by getting off the pitch or the
Uh-huh.
ring. They stayed in all the way, right? So guys who win
Uh-huh.
basketball championships, as in the US, when you think of Michael Jordan, and
Oh yeah.
The Last Dance, he didn't
Oh,
stop
that was a good stuff, man. That dude, man. Yeah.
fighting until the end, right? I mean, when you look
Yeah.
at LeBron, didn't stop fighting until the end. Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
same thing. When you bring it back home, when you think about Springboks who won the World Cup last year, you can put on, there's a
Uh-huh.
point where everybody wrote them off that they were not going to win, but they themselves did not give up on them. So you have to stay in the fight of your life,
Uh-huh.
and it's just for your life. Every day is a fight for your life. The decisions that you make are you fighting for your life. So you have to stay in the fight. And then
Absolutely.
the last one is around, no one is coming to rescue you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean that, is people do not take responsibility for their life because they believe somebody else will come sort out their problems and rescue them,
Uh-huh.
right? So there is no Navy SEAL coming, right?
Yep.
There is no boats parachuting people. Because one thing that I learned during that time, I remember I would speak to a lot of people about my problems, and everybody that I would meet, and everybody would just say, sorry, man, I hope you get out of it, because
Uh-huh.
there's nothing else they can do. It's your life.
True.
You have to sort it out. So there's no one coming to rescue you. It sounds harsh, but
And,
once you
and
see,
the truth is, it's not personal because they themselves have their own stuff they're
exactly.
dealing with.
So
Uh-huh.
even, and I know you go to the Potter's house sometimes. Even if you're to become patient with TD Jakes and you're in the
Uh-huh.
deepest of problems, the best that TD can do is pray for you, right?
Uh-huh.
And give you advice on life.
Uh-huh.
But you have to implement those things
Uh-huh.
that he's giving you. So even if you had an all-night prayer, at the end,
Speak it, man.
at 6:30, in the morning, you
Uh-huh.
still gotta go face life. If you need to
Uh-huh.
pay back debt, you still gotta pay back debt. If you need to sell that house because it's too expensive and you can't afford it, you have to make those decisions. And I'm not against prayer, but I think prayer has got its place. But no one is coming to rescue you.
And man, I'm glad you say that, because it's about you sharpening your life skills and learning how life works. And I
Yep.
always say, if you don't understand something, you will be incompetent in that. A lot of us don't understand how life works and how to
Yes.
work the systems of life. Therefore, we're incompetent and don't like the
Yeah.
consequences that we're getting in life. And
Yeah.
so it is what it is. You got to sharpen that. You know,
100%.
I'm sure everybody got to see why I invited this man to come and have this discussion, man. Thanks again for sharing your story,
Thanks, brother.
because
Thanks.
this is the vulnerability that people require in order to understand that you are not there alone. I quit my job in corporate America to walk this journey with people so we can normalize mental health, because a lot of us are struggling. And you say it's
Yep.
something to live for. This is my something to live for. There is
Exactly.
help out there. Now, what we're going to do, if you visit my website, www.insidefitness.us, there's going to be a pop-up on there where you can get a slide deck I've prepared with all the common mental health illnesses and the symptoms that you can look at and the steps you need to take to get treatment, you know. And definitely there's going to be a part two to this conversation. You know, thanks once again for joining me, man. I appreciate you taking your time to do this, man. All
Thanks.
right, man. Thanks. All
Take
right.
care.
Okay.
Cool. Bye.
Man, that's really cool, man. That went really well, man.
Yeah,
You
no, good.
you